call these three the wizards. I mean, I've been calling them the wizards for weeks. Come on, Dennis. But I just can't say enough about how much we appreciate this team being here, and I hope this leads to other discussions around these topics.
Joanne, thank you so much for inviting me here and providing a forum. There's no topic other than this I'd rather speak out on. However, everything I had prepared to say, I threw away, based on what I've heard since I walked in that door. And I actually thought of four things I want to comment on and share with you. The first is Gilbert White's dissertation in 1945, which tried to answer one question: why, despite everything so many are doing, are flood losses in America increasing? Having addressed a similar question at the end of the last century, why, despite everything so many people are doing for so many different natural hazards and disasters, are things continuing to get worse? And I'm left with the following question that I'd like to leave with each of you. But you have to promise you won't have your feelings hurt or feel bad. So how many of you will promise? Bill didn't put up his hand.
Good for you, you noticed.
Despite everything you've done, or your agency has done, or you've ever thought to do now and in the future, things will continue to get worse. And to think differently is insanity. Why would what we might take on in the year 2020, would we change what didn't happen in the 1950s or the 1960s or the 1970s or the 1980s or the 1990s or in the, what do you call it, OOs? It's an interesting point of view. Proved me wrong. The second thing I thought of was I think I may know why. And I had this idea as a few of my colleagues were talking before I came to the podium. Our view of mitigation is terribly narrow. It may be so narrow that future generations may call it misplaced. How could we possibly think we could achieve progress and reverse the ever-stemming increase in losses that nature imposes on humanity? When we don't look at the context. Income disparity has been growing in this nation for decades. Do you know what that means? There ain't any more middle class in America. Do you get it? There's the filthy rich and everybody else. Who suffers the most in disasters? The poor. We're growing more poor. How can we achieve mitigation in the standard way, ignoring that context? We even saw it in colorful graphs. Thanks so much. How can we hope to accomplish more in a rampant era of capitalistic globalization, when the sources of income are spread around the globe rather than indigenous to our own society? Globalization facilitated the abundance of labor, of workers, pushing wages down. That'll do more with disaster losses than selling more flood insurance policies. We have an aging infrastructure. Anybody notice that? Mm-hmm. Even a slight wind is going to blow some of it down. Climate change is changing. The climate-related issues we'll face today and in the future. What are we, crazy? That we think we can swim up those streams and make progress? We're not even going to tread water where we are. We're going to get pushed backwards. I'm not saying it has to be that way. What I'm saying is a continued narrow definition of mitigation is no longer allowed, because it displaces our attention to social forces that are having more to do with future disaster losses than they ever did, and maybe why, when Gilbert said, why do disaster losses continue to increase? Nothing has changed since the 40s. And you thought demography was the grim science? Another thought that came to mind as I listened, and I did enjoy being in this room, was that we lack focus in yet another direction. We lack focus in that we don't have a standardized set of practices of mitigation. We don't have a mitigation manual. I was thinking about the people in my nation's government who are the home of emergency preparedness planning. They have books this thick about what a preparedness plan looks like, how you practice, how you exercise, how you have implementing procedures. It's all written down. It's formalized. Is there such a document in reference to mitigation? As I listened, everyone talked about mitigation, but while I was in the back of the room, I felt like I was watching a BB in a moving boxcar, bouncing all over the moon. I wrote down some of the hits of the BB. What is mitigation? Mitigation is building codes. Mitigation is building practices. Mitigation is land use. Mitigation is flood insurance. Mitigation is shutters on windows. Mitigation is dams and levees. Do you get what I mean by a BB bouncing around in a boxcar? But that was just mitigation. Who does mitigation? This isn't a comprehensive list. This is just what I heard in this room today. Mitigation is done by planners. It's done by government. It's done by local cities. It's done by builders. It's done by householders. It's done by individuals. To a sociologist, that makes our head swim. Because each of those are different knowledge areas and levels of expertise. How do you make mitigation happen? Regardless of who you are, whether you're the House of Representatives and the Senate, or private corporations, or local towns and villages, who you are is people. We actually know, even though we may not agree on all the other elements I was talking about, whether we were viewing a context or not, whether we were on one side of the boxcar, in the middle, at the top, or at the bottom of the boxcar, we know how to make mitigation happen because it involves people. And then I got a tear in my eye. I'll tell you why. How mitigation happens is when you change culture. And people value thinking in the long term and value taking behaviors that result in safer houses, safer communities, safer states, a safer nation. That's changing culture. And how do you get culture changed? We couldn't be in a better state to answer that question. If you drive to the south part of Colorado, you can visit the cave dwellings of the Anasazi Indians. And there actually were anthropologists that studied how different forms of pottery, new innovative ideas spread from one part of their adobe structures to the others. And they were adopted. How it happens that the Anasazi came to share new forms of pottery with each other and it spread across their civilization is how mitigation spreads. People talk to each other. And then what gave me the tear in my eye is we once had in place in America a project to facilitate just that. It was called Project Impact. And we set it aside. And we probably would be wise not to bring Project Impact back with that name. However, how mitigation might occur in a local community is if the locals came to value it. How they'd come to value it is if they met a person like Ann Patton, an agency like the USGS, or a corporation like Levi Strauss and Pacific Gas and Electric, and talked about things. Could be over a martini. Could be over a barbecue. That's how Ann did it. So, we once had what we now desire. We can reclaim that. Please keep sending those wonderful packages from Washington, D.C. when you can ship them to the people of the country. Please give us the money that you can grab whenever you can grab it. Now's not the time to expect you to be able to grab much, but what we need to do is get the conversation going in America's communities once again. It worked. Sponsored by FEMA once before, it'll work again. And it may not be FEMA who sponsors it, but we can still have that equivalent. So I want to end on an optimistic note, because frankly, I'm not optimistic. The note I want to end on is, despite the fact that things continue to worsen, despite all of our efforts, despite the fact that the contextual factors, and we saw just one of them diagrammed elegantly for us a few minutes ago, we can accomplish a great deal. We need to focus our thinking. We need to jump all over doing the things that we know works. And we must never, ever think that we can get this job done alone. We need to include every other person in the country to join our team. Now, having had the fortunate opportunity, and this is my last comment, to have gotten to hang out with Gilbert White when I was a young man being trained in graduate school, I actually know why Gilbert accomplished so much and is so well thought of. He never, ever, ever stopped. And one of the things he never stopped doing was enrolling more and more people to join in his life's mission, without accomplishing much in terms of turning back the stem of losses in the nation. And he, more than others, might be sad, right, thinking about that. He died smiling. And those of you who had the opportunity to meet him and know him know how happy he was. So it was the journey, and we're on the mitigation journey. Thank you for forming this association. I'm thrilled to know that you exist and look forward to attending and participating in many more of your meetings. Thank you so much.